agenda. Good evening. Welcome to the Fincom meeting for August 16th. Our agenda is for the evening, we're going to have a paramedic proposal by Chief Wodzinski. Welcome. Budget and finance update for the sitting in Bonnie. Capital and debt service analysis, the Fincom 2016-17 meeting schedule, Fincom department assignments for members, member updates, approved meeting minutes from July 12th, and then we will adjourn. So why don't we kick it off with you, Chief? Welcome.
All right. Thank you. Actually, we'll start off with the last page in your packet.
Last page.
Tell you.
Out of the box, this guy, huh?
So that can come right off.
Oh, that was smart.
All right. This is our introduction to the Littleton ALS proposal for enhancing our service to the community.
And ALS stands for?
Advanced life support. It would be taking our basic EMS service and putting it to the paramedic level. On this current sheet that you all have on the handout, unfortunately I don't have it up on the screen, it shows the fiscal breakdown for the last 3 years, and as well as our run volume. In the center column, you can clearly see from between FY14 to FY16 the increase in our run volume from 826 to 1,053. That's just for ambulance runs. That doesn't include any of our fire incidents. And as well, all the way to the right, you can see the increased revenue from the bottom, from the 357,680 up to we're just over 400,000 in the last fiscal year for revenues collected.
So that's not a linear relationship.
No. Some of the current issues that we are dealing with our current ALS provider, which is Pro EMS. They are based in Cambridge. Currently, they satellite out of, they have one in Acton. It's actually in South Acton, almost on the Maynard line, and one in Lincoln. We were told that the one in Acton will be going away, so their base will be Lincoln. So we have extended responses.
So what does that mean? If you need a paramedic, they come from Lincoln or Acton?
Correct. Currently, very frequently right now, they respond from Crosby's Corner or Emerson Hospital. On occasion, if we're lucky, they may be in the area of the Rotary when they respond. So we have a range of anywhere between 10 and 15 minutes, which we'll see as we go through the slides. A few of that's one of the issues that we're dealing with, is the extended responses. The other is the unavailability of the ALS unit. Typically, they try to run 2, but unfortunately, they're not always available because of the run volume within the district. Right now, that it covers 7 towns, which is the Concord area Emergency Medical Services, SAMARA, I think that's the acronym, the right word for it.
Are we the farthest west as far as the communities?
We are.
So we're on the outlying edge of it?
Correct, right. So it's, it is, we are the furthest out. Lucky enough for us, we have medics on both sides of us, Westford and Air, which we do reach out to on occasion. A few of our other issues that we're still dealing with is issues with billing or calls that aren't being billed, and
I thought that was corrected a while back.
we'll get into that.
Okay.
So we'll start right into the presentation on this. Right off the bat, it just shows our mission statement for the fire department, just providing protection for lives and property through a combination of emergency services and loss prevention. As we go on to the next slide, this shows our call volume with projection. Over the last 5 years, we've been in the area of 700, and now we're upwards of 1,050. And it's a constant increase, and there is no one thing that is driving this. It's between elderly, car crashes, it's a variety of things. So it's just a steady trend.
It looks like, I mean, kind of going back to, say, 2000, looks like 2008, we had a spike there, and then it's kind of went down a little bit, and then it's climbed back up. Do you have any feel for why? I mean, it definitely is on the rise, looking at the trend line here, but why it kind of dipped down and then came back up?
Every now and then, it does a little correction.
Okay.
In the last few years, if you look back at the economy and the town, the growth that's in this community is just skyrocketing.
Yeah.
It's taking off, and all of the public services are feeling the brunt of that.
Is this a typical chart if we were to look at the surrounding communities as well?
Yes, everybody is dealing with the same issues. They said it's a constant increase, and we're also struggling with the manpower coming back to help us with this on the call side. As we go on, speaking of population, we look at 1990 with the population of Littleton was 7,051, and the projection for 2020 is 9,365. Well, speaking to
Aren't we
Diane.
there?
Ruh-roh.
Corey, that's for 2020. We're almost there.
Yeah.
We're at 9,300 now.
Yeah.
So that's 4 years ahead of the anticipation. So, the community is growing, and like I said, it is affecting all of us. When we look at our ALS response times, the average it's over 7 minutes. The average response is between 10 and 15. And as they move away from their South Acton site, it's going to be closer to that 15.
So if the call for this is going up, though, why would they be closing the South Acton site?
They are basically satelliting in their busiest area. So they'll have 2 trucks in that region, and that's where their volume is. Unfortunately, we're on the farthest point, and if they can get here, they will.
Yeah, they're losing a lot of towns that they used to service.
Okay.
that
People are doing this.
Are now
basically
doing
this.
exactly what Scott's
Several-
proposing.
Correct. Like Westford. Westford was originally part of the group, and they broke off and started their own ALS service. Same with Air. So the towns are doing the change.
That's why,
and
that was
advancing
the
their
missing piece
services.
I didn't get.
Yep. So the typical perception of, that the public has is when they call 911, they need an ambulance, it's going to come and pick them up, and they're going to the hospital. When in actuality, they call dispatch, dispatch notifies us, we'll get called out, we'll arrive at a scene. ALS may or may not have been called, we'll determine that we need them. We'll start transport to the hospital, potentially meet up with ALS en route. Now, we're 20 minutes into this now, and then we go to the hospital. On several occasions, the ALS service isn't available, or we may be going to Neshoba Hospital, and they're responding from Crosby's Corner, and we're ready to go, and they're only at Route 27 in Acton. So they're canceled. If we're lucky enough to have Air or Westford be available to us, then we'll start that medic service to assist us. If not, we'll go direct to the hospital, just with a rapid transport.
So what is, excuse my ignorance, what's the difference between when you transport and they do? What are they actually providing?
So we transport, as an EMS service, we are all basic EMTs. We can offer basic diagnostics, stabilize, and transport to the hospital. As a paramedic, you can administer drugs. You can administer medications, you can put them on the heart monitor. By us transferring to that type of a service, we arrive to the typical scene in 3 to 4 minutes. So in that 3 to 4 minutes, we would be beginning our paramedic evaluation. And if drugs needed to be administered or the heart monitor needed to be put on, that would be done immediately. And that may determine which facility we're going to. If they were to have a heart attack, we'd be going to Lowell General instead of Emerson and Neshoba, where they would want, because that's the proper place to have the immediate care.
So does that mean that when you send a truck out, they're always going to have the paramedic on? You wouldn't have the EMTs anymore? Everybody would be a paramedic?
Nope.
More or less?
No, we would have, it's a PB service. It's a paramedic and a basic on every truck. So you have two.
Yeah, both.
Yeah.
Okay, but
you have
you
a
do-
basic-
there will be a
they're both
paramedic on every
EMTs.
truck.
There will be one with advanced skills
Okay.
on it as well, yes.
Okay. So it's not like you send one in and they figure, oh, we need something else, and then
Nope.
somebody else has to come out.
Correct. Here, this is our, again, our run volume in the range from 2014 to FY '16. We have the total number of calls, again, the A26 in the range up to 1,053, with the requests for ALS service in the center column. As you can see, we're all in the range of between 50 and 56% of our calls are an ALS service.
So,
The 200 or the 197 that say canceled?
So on this section, all right, as we look at these numbers, there are on many occasions where they're canceled. They're too far out. We'll cancel them because we're going to an alternative, a different hospital where we won't be meeting them en route. There may not be a need for them. They may have been called and, all right, maybe we don't want to wait. They really don't need them. But we could offer a basic service, but for the amount of time that you're sitting there waiting for them, it's not worth it. We could actually begin transport and get to the hospital quicker. There are other ALS service, 38 times. Those are our calls through Air and Westford. That's when we'll, meet them en route. Maybe we're going to Lowell General, we decide to start Westford instead of waiting for Pro to come from Concord or Lincoln. Or Air, when we're en route to Neshoba. Triage to BLS, that's 9. Basically, that's Pro saying, okay, they don't need to be there. This person has,
Okay. What's BLS stand for?
basic life support compared to ALS with the advanced life support.
And that is handled by you folks?
Right.
In the ambulance, okay.
Yep. And there are 18 occasions where there wasn't any ALS available, including surrounding towns.
If Westford responds, or Air, do they bill us the same way our ProServe guys would do?
Not exactly. We have a flat rate fee for services provided through Air and Westford. And that's the same fee that we're charged for every run that they come to. Pro, well, that's part of our problem. It's not exactly clear the amount of money that they're taking from each incident. And there are several incidents which we actually have some of the facts with us and some of the statements that show that there are several incidents that aren't billed for one reason or another. It may be because information wasn't received to them in time to bill, because there's a specific window. You can't just say, oh, hey, here's a bill that came up last month, we forgot to bill it. Sorry, but the clock's done ticking and you've lost your window.
So we aren't getting them the information, or they aren't asking for the information?
Absolutely.
So,
This is
I
Kim
think we're
Fleck.
talking about, sorry, I'm
So-
his assistant. So, I think you're asking, to answer your question, the invoices that we get from Pro, we have an agreement with Pro for training, for a bunch of different services from them. They send us a bill and they don't break it down. So we don't know how much we're paying for billing, we don't know how much we're paying for training. We just get a bill of a different amount every month and we don't know what it's for. And they won't provide details for it.
Well, it's,
Bonnie has,
And
we've dealt
gone
with
back
this
and
on
forth
many
For
occasions.
over a year trying to figure
Yeah.
out why, and we
Right.
don't get the answers that we need.
It's,
pay it.
Well, that's kind of where we're at.
it's
is we
part,
need
it's part of the
another solution,
frustration.
Because if we don't pay it, then we're not gonna get the ALS services, and our residents need ALS services.
Right.
So we're kind of stuck here, and that's how this all came about. So then, as far as the billing goes, they aren't billing these calls for one reason or another. It could be that they're missing documentation. It could be that they lost the documentation and they found it 2 weeks later and it was too late to bill. There's many different reasons why they're not billing it, but it's not being billed at all.
It could even be as simple as it's missing a signature, but the information isn't being relayed back to us that that's missing, because it's all done electronically. So it's submitted electronically, whereas we wouldn't have the ability to see it or review it before it's submitted. But there isn't a communication as relating as to what that issue may be.
Why isn't that a good thing for us?
Excuse me?
You don't send me a bill, I don't have to pay you.
Right, it's just not good for us, though.
Why not?
I think
Because-
they're
we
billing the
don't get
insurance
ours.
companies, they're talking about billing the insurance
Right.
company, not billing
Right,
us.
right.
They're also not as aggressive in collecting.
Because it's not their money.
Yeah,
The company we had previously to Pro EMS was very aggressive in their collections. And Pro EMS told us when we went to them that their collection rates aren't nearly as good as the other one.
Why
correct
do
me
we
if
go
I'm
with them?
wrong, we're roughly about 65%?
We're about 65% on a collection rate, which is not good.
Whereas the other company that we are looking to go back to, they claim to be in the 92 percentile
The
for
reason we
collections.
moved, well, not that it's history
they-
now, but
Pro
The-
EMS wouldn't work with that company. They build their own.
Right, and we're in a contract with
oh, I
them
see,
for
I see,
multiple
so it's one of
services.
the, I gotcha.
How long ago was that contract generated for Pro?
2008, 2007.
Yeah.
So we didn't
Yeah, I
make
think
the
it was
change?
10 years.
Because I know we had this issue when I was on the Board of Selectmen,
Yes.
and they made some adjustments then, right? I thought I couldn't remember if we changed vendors or what we did.
You have a couple things. All the ALS used to be run through Emerson, and Emerson disbanded their ALS program. Pro took the contract over. And then so, because Emerson was losing money, Emerson had one truck to cover from Weston to Littleton to Westford, everywhere. So Pro comes in and they set up, hey, we'll take it over and we'll put 2 trucks out there and we'll have one, and they set one up in Acton eventually, and it's covering Maynard and Acton. Acton's going ALS, their union just approved that. So the whole thing stems from, they're actively going after ALS billing. It's the BLS things they don't go on, they don't care. And
Right.
that's the difference. And-
Okay.
And they're not gonna use
We had the
coastal.
same issue with Emerson, right?
Well,
Because I remember there was a
It
lot of
was a
stuff that
different
wasn't
time.
billed or.
It was in the very end of their cycle, they actually took, had a little bit more to do with the billing. But there was also the time frame when that we were with Coastal. When we were with Coastal, we had a much better return.
Okay.
in the group that's known as
Thanks, Bert.
Samara, the towns that are in it,
Clearing up the
ourselves
file.
included, we operate under the medical license of a doctor at Emerson. They set the billing rate. So they go out when they meet with Pro and Keith Bergman goes and they said, hey, this is what we're gonna bill for Medicare and everything else. So that's where the rate is set. What's croaking us is the collection rate and the fact that we can't ask Westford and Air to be our primary ALS. They're too busy.
Right.
So when you're on the highway and someone's injured.
Sure.
Yeah, ALS 2 is on from Lincoln Center. It's not their fault. They're busy. They're out there. But it is kind of frustrating when you say we're transporting to Lowell, and if we don't get Westford, we can't meet with the Lowell medic either. So we're transporting all the way to Lowell General, and we can't intercept with anyone. So it's a lack of quality care for the people we serve, I think. is quite-
So your ALS would be available to surrounding towns as well, then?
Correct, yep. That's one of the things that we'd be looking to do. One of our solutions to this is to break away from Pro and provide this service ourselves and offer a paramedic service to the citizens of Littleton that would begin within that 3 to 4 minutes of, time response from their call. When we arrive, that service is going to begin. We're not waiting for that 15 or 20 minutes for a surrounding town to come in and assist us. We will still have agreements with our surrounding communities that have that service. We'll provide service to them for ALS, and they'll also provide it to us as our backups.
So you would assume all the billing responsibilities?
We would have a contract with a billing company, such as Coastal. That's the company that we used in the past, and they're very aggressive. We've been working with them to get our numbers, and we'll get into that in a couple slides.
So as far as, it sounds as if quality control might be one of the issues as far as documentation?
Yep.
So how would you
Correct.
propose to
Address that.
address that?
We'll get into that as well.
Can I ask one more
so-
question on the billing, and this isn't on the history of more going forward. So today you have a rate and it's based on the paramedics, no, the EMTs being on board. So now going forward, you say there'll be a paramedic on every ambulance. So presumably the rate is higher, correct?
Correct.
Now, how does the insurance, do the insurance pay for that, whether even though the person, they really,
So the way that it works is
Yeah.
you bill for either a BLS call or an ALS, depending on the type of services that
Okay.
the patient receives. And all the insurance companies have what's called a contracted rate. So they agree to pay you within 30 days at a certain amount, a certain percentage of your rate. And then they pay that immediately. So you get charged basically either for a paramedic or for a basic, depending on what services you get.
in the percent, I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead.
Just
Yeah,
the
the
follow-up,
percent- that was my question.
what was the percentage of the calls that are?
The numbers you're showing, there's 1.1 million potential billed.
If you look at the bottom.
You're not going to get 1.1 million in. What,
If you look at the bottom of that page, it shows the contractual allowance taken out, it's 500 and something.
The bottom of which page,
Okay,
I'm
I
sorry.
see.
Yeah, we
Okay.
kind of jumped ahead.
Yeah,
but-
we've moved up a bit, so.
With
It all
the
comes
numbers.
down to the
All right,
numbers.
all
The numbers, yeah, right.
Okay.
So
So,
if you look at the amount deducted for contractual allowance, that's the amount that the insurance companies won't pay. They're not gonna pay that amount, so that projected collected amount is the actual amount that the insurance companies are going to pay.
Okay, so it's around 600,000 theoretically, if you have this mix
If
of,
you have the 700 transports at that.
About half.
So why do we need a collection agency to get the money from insurance companies? Just help me understand that.
that's a significant amount of work for us to handle in-house. When you can, Coastal, if you look at the very top of the page, they have agreed for the first 6 months to charge us 4.5%. And after the 6 months, 4% after, going forward. Roughly $36,000 for the amount of time that they will hunt down, over 1,000 different billable incidents throughout the year and hound, rebill, and everything like that. It is well worth having a private company do that than us doing it in-house. They have a much better collection rate.
And I come from a billing background, I used to do ambulance billing, you need at least 2 full-time employees to handle a 700 call volume, because you have to audit all the paperwork, determine how to bill it, determine what you're billing for, and then call and follow up on each claim and try to chase down the insurance companies to get paid. It's a,
Software and everything else
Yes.
too, right?
Absolutely.
yes.
So, without really dissecting into these numbers and looking through them, how much are we getting today in collections percentage-wise, and what will we move to based on your projections with Coastal?
Everything is right here. Let's dissect these numbers. Let's look at them.
We don't
because-
have the percentage today because Pro won't release that information to us. So all we have is the information of what we've collected. We don't know much.
You don't know
else.
how much has been billed?
Oh. Again, when you look at the numbers, the non-contractual numbers, it's well over 1 million
Right.
that has been billed. And then the contractual portion kicks in, and there is variance. We've been able to, look back at the last 3 fiscal years as to what our deposits equal. But when you go back and look at all of the billing records, there are many incidents, about 16% of the incidents weren't billed for one reason or another. The frustrating part is when you say, we go to these crashes on the highway all the time. There are several incidents where these motor vehicle accidents are not billed. When you go to bill an insurance company for a crash, we get 100% of that, not the contractual allowance, because it's being paid for by, through motor vehicle insurance.
Right.
So that's a much better return. We want those. So that's one thing that's frustrating, is when you see those not being billed, don't understand why.
So you really don't have a handle as far as what we should have gotten from Pro?
Unfortunately, no. And it gets a little bit deeper. So we have a contract with them where they provide our ALS service. They provide our training. They provide the computer software where all of the EMS reports are done. All of the EMS reports are kept in their database in Cambridge. We don't even have those on site with us.
I didn't know they're not taking money from us. I mean, do we know?
That is why we are presenting this, and we feel that we can do a much better job at this while increasing staffing and improve the service to the community. and bring our revenues into our community.
Right, makes sense.
So when you look at these numbers, starting right at the top, we're looking at adding 5 medics. The numbers are up there. We've added in the fringe, which,
Yeah.
in my eyes, yeah. So there's the 76,000. That's the fringe for these. So we added that in with, on top of $160,000 for equipment that would outfit both ambulances. That would be in part of the capital program, as well as gear, software, uniforms. That would be in the budget for that year. So that would add 5 guys, very similar to 5 staff. Very similar to when we went around the clock. We would have 1 for each shift, being the 4, and the 5th being the swing person. So the swing person would go on to shift, just like our other swing man, which does 4 days on and then 4 days off. Having the 2 swing persons in the position would now cover that 8-day cycle. We basically work off of an 8-day rotation.
What's Air have for staffing? What's Westford got for staffing? I mean, is it
Westford has
Westford probably has
9 per shift now? 9 per shift.
how many
Air
how many
has,
paramedics?
They run it some days 3, some days 4.
right.
'Cause their program is
Much
What are they?
better.
3 years, 4 years.
3 or 4 years. So all of their new hires are coming through as medics. You know, our run volume will be very close to hitting 2,000 emergencies this year. You know, you look at other communities like, even like Acton and Concord, where they hit their 2,000 maybe 10 or 15 years ago, but they have staff of 8 and 10 per shift. We're there, and we're doing all of this same run volume, same inspection volume as these larger communities, and we're doing it with far less. That does not mean by any means that it's safe, because it's not. That's where we're struggling with having call members. Call members have full-time jobs. They have other obligations. They're not available during weekdays. So we do the best we can, and we rely on mutual aid.
So what have we collected? How many dollars have we collected in the last couple of years?
On the very first page that we looked at?
It's on the bottom, Fred. You guys, Fred was there.
Oh, yeah. Fred was
Oh, right
there.
here. It's right here. It's on the bird. Yeah, there
Oh,
it
this
is.
one, okay.
Sorry.
So that's
So-
the dollars collected in the last 3 fiscal years.
Okay, so just strictly being mercenary about this, right? So in FY '16, there were 1,050 transports. Without the cost of $569,000, we collected $400,000,
Correct.
right? So if we spend $569,000 and we collect at the 599 rate, we're basically picking up 200,000 from where we are today in terms of revenue, and we're spending close to 600,000 to collect another 200,000. So from a town budget, that difference of 400,000, we have to find to fund. It's out, and again, if I'm wrong, please correct me, but
Go ahead.
So the numbers, the projected numbers that you're looking at
Yeah.
are based off of 700 transports. We wanted to be extremely conservative with all of the numbers that we gave you guys.
But I use
The
I use
599.
your $600,000,
Right,
which
we-
is for 700.
Right, we anticipate that we will collect more than that. This is if we have a very slow year, if the call volume just isn't there, that's what we'd be looking at. We tried to be extremely conservative.
So.
Plus, there's also
In
the
reality,
savings
you'd
for
have to
not
take
paying
some
for an ALS service.
Comparing apples to
We'd be,
apples.
I don't know if you want to go over the middle
Just take
portion
a
there.
third of that off.
Hang on.
So when we,
Yeah.
I follow what your thought process.
Okay, but with the numbers you're presenting, we're about 400,000 short. Now, I understand if you go from the 700 runs to 1,000 runs, that's a 40% increase. And that certainly should eat into the 400. And if our collection rate is better, that should eat into, if not make the 400 go away, right?
There's also some one-time costs in those,
Right.
that 569, the 160, the 20 for software, the 10 for gear. So, I mean, it's roughly 200,000 of that 500,000.
But the first year, my point is the first year, this is not break even no matter how you cut it. And we need to know what the town has to swallow to kickstart this program.
I think what would be helpful is if you took this first year and maybe put a second and third year in there, kind of look at it as a 3-year ROI versus
Right.
trying to look at it as one, because it doesn't look very attractive the first year because you've got some of those fixed expenses. But you take those fixed expenses out in year 2, it becomes more attractive.
Absolutely.
I think from your
It does.
position, you want to sell it that way versus.
Yep.
Yeah, no,
Looking
I
to do that.
agree. And that's where
Bring
I'm.
it tonight.
And what is your increase, with other towns? So you're going to be providing a service to surrounding community as well. So
Absolutely.
I'd be curious to know how many times Westford and Air responds. Are we talking a few hundred a year outside of their own town? I mean, what's the,
So we had them 38 times in our town alone.
yeah. So that would be added on.
All of our surrounding communities, we would, we would be a service that's available for them.
So
We
what
really
other
tried
towns
to-
don't have it though now? I mean, I know you could still support Acton or Westford if everybody they have is out. But are there other towns near us that are still without?
Acton, Boxborough, Harvard, Groton.
But Acton just agreed. to
They just
do it,
agreed,
right?
so that
They'll
would-
probably be on deck before
they'd be in
we
the same
will,
boat.
right?
That would be, if we were to go forward with this, we'd both be coming ALS.
On the same-
and about on the same time. yeah.
Right.
So Boxborough, Harvard, and Groton, in theory.
Correct. Many times, how many times have we gone to Westford in the last year? Probably roughly 20 to 30 times alone, and we're meeting up with the Lowell paramedics. So if we offered the service ourselves, we would need the additional medics. And again, with these numbers, we really tried to be as conservative as possible. We haven't added in the mileage costs. We haven't, we based this on 3-year-old numbers. At 700 transports, not 1,000. We did not add in the ALS costs. These are BLS costs. So when you add it all in the first year, going with our numbers, taking out the capital costs for the ambulances, it's a pretty close to break even the first year. On top of that, we wouldn't be looking at saying, okay, July 1st, we're starting this service. We would say, if it were to go forward, we would say, okay, July, we're going to start a process. We'll perhaps find our 5 medics. Their first day of service would most likely be at the fire academy, because you'd hire medics, they may not have the fire background. So day 1, maybe it's August, September, October, they'd go to the academy, they'd do their 11 weeks at the academy, they'd graduate, and then within a month's time, we'd do our interface with the hospital and all of the setup functions, and then start the service.
So realistically, you have 6 months value the first year.
Correct.
So again, the town has to front the 600,000 or the 570, and we'll get half a year's worth of benefit the first year. So again, in order for us, the town is going to have to fund 6 months' worth of the program. So I think Greg's idea of saying, okay, the cash flow, basically cash flow analysis for the first 3 years. The first 6 months looks awful because it's all expense. The next 6 months looks a little better because it ramps up. The next 6 months probably looks pretty good because you're running strong, you get everybody trained,
Yep.
and you've already spent the bulk of the capital money.
Right.
So what we're asking the taxpayers to do is trust that the program's going to work in year 2 or year and a half, and we're going to spend a lot of money to get the program started. So, I mean, that's really what we have to go to town meeting with,
Right.
is that first year's budget, which is not going to look quite this good because it's only going to have 6 months' worth of revenue.
But the revenue in the third year makes,
Should,
Oh, no, absolutely. I
It
think
should
from that
balance out.
standpoint, it's a worthwhile investment.
yeah, I think
But
it's
the
a good
first year
idea.
budget is going to not look that wonderful.
But and in the meantime, you're still collecting BLS ambulance calls, so we're still running BLS, so we're still collecting ambulance receipts for that, so it's not.
Right. So that would be
Well,
approved.
Right.
Well, but
Because we would be with an aggressive billing company. So at least we'd see an increase in our revenues coming in
That's
just
okay.
with the billing company and a BLS service.
Yeah, well, your first year would show that you're still doing the BLS.
Yes.
But once these guys are out of the academy, like Fred said, the second 6 months they're actually working, and you'll start showing some ALS
It'll
money
ramp up.
along with the BLS money.
Correct.
So,
Correct.
yeah.
Chief, I have one more question for
Yeah.
you. What about our current ambulances? Are they gonna get used more? They're gonna take more abuse? Is there gonna be more mileage put on them? How does that play into this whole thing?
Our run volume, it may increase slightly by responding to surrounding communities. However, we're already doing these runs. Our run volume is on a steady increase right now.
Right.
And I don't see that taking a dip.
And
It hasn't in
As far as
several
wear and tear
years.
on the ambulances, the way that it works with an intercept for a paramedic service is they still get in our vehicle. Our
Okay.
vehicle goes,
So you're
the
still
paramedic
using
gets on our truck, so
right.
it's the same amount of mileage.
Right.
That's
So
good.
how many miles a year typically do you put on an ambulance?
It's because we stagger them. Two groups use one, two groups use the other. I'd say around 15 to 20,000 miles a year. Depends on, we transport to Worcester, we transport to Boston, we transport, we go wherever. One of the things we looked at is when, in 2012, we got rid of van-style ambulances and we went to an F-Series truck. And the chief and I have talked, so we put in a plan in our capital plan, hey, we need to buy new ambulances and rotate them for, I think now though, we were talking about, we'll replace the chassis and put the box back on it. So instead of saying, hey, we need 250,000 for an ambulance, hey, we need 120, and we're gonna re-chassis, we're gonna take the box off, put a new chassis on it. They'll do all the upgrades that need to be done, and we'll do it that way. So the idea is, I mean, they work hard when they drive them, and not like the chief and I to take nice care of our vehicles.
A little plug for yourself, nice.
Sarcasm, I think it's well.
I'll commute to work. He's closer than I am. But, so the idea is always
Why
looking
do you have
at,
to try again?
do we want to keep coming in saying, hey, we're bringing more revenue, but now we need another ambulance? And it's to look at ways that we can, that capital cost is to outfit the ambulances with the equipment that the paramedics need that we don't possess now. And a lot of it is monitoring.
And realistically, when's the next time, I don't have the capital plan in front of me, when's the next time we're going to have a bump for an ambulance?
I believe technically it's supposed to be this year,
Yeah.
This year, okay.
along with the ladder truck.
So space-wise, has this already been figured into the new fire station as well as?
Yes.
We're talking the personnel alone and some of this equipment as well?
Correct. Yes, yeah, the new facility will accommodate this and more, absolutely. And going forward, on several occasions, you may have heard about some of the community medicine and, the way that EMS our insurance companies are billing. If we have the opportunity to go to Medic, looking at year 2 and 3, once we're established, by providing a community medicine program within town as elderly or people come home after surgeries or people that need care at home before the home health care can arrive, this is a service that we would be able to offer as medics. Going to the residents, evaluating citizens of town and making sure they're taking their medication, making sure that their vitals are stable and good, and potentially, alleviating an unnecessary trip to the hospital. But on the backside, you're creating an additional revenue stream with the insurance company saying, okay, you did the home health care, you did the the visit, and you'll get, a couple $100 for that, potentially, instead of the lump sum, having the wear and tear, the time out of town. You're talking a 15 or 20-minute visit with somebody. But that's already being done on the left coast and down south. There's several states that are working this model right now and getting revenue from the insurance company.
But it's added value to the residents.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Again, this is all stuff that we've been talking about as we, looking forward, just talking about the mobile health care, once the program's established, and simply, on top of this, it would also be direct right from dispatch. When it starts at dispatch, that's when they would know the need for ALS. Right now, we pay for a service through Pro called EMD, Emergency Medical Dispatch. As soon as 911 comes into here, it goes there, and we don't know what's going on. They may come back and give us an update, but they're actually coaching, these people through whatever may be going on in the home. And that, again, would come back to our own dispatchers, and that would be a
So does
service.
that say you need a different level of dispatch?
Correct. We used to have emergency medical dispatch in town. That was several years ago, and since they switched to Pro, they do not need that, but they would need that, yeah.
So is that an incremental cost that should be factored into the program?
Initially, Chief King and I, we have talked about this, and it would be most likely, yes, the short answer. But to also deal with it initially, to see how it goes and see how it phases in, with the caveat that, yes, they may need to increase dispatch as well.
Okay.
Is our current BLS service, is it paying for itself?
Yes. Right now, there is roughly $350,000 that is put towards our budget yearly. I know that the additional comes to the town. There's also the funding in there that assists with the ambulance, the equipment.
Yeah, I
So
can see the
it,
number, but.
Yep.
But that's not just put to the budget just for that. I mean, we're fronting the money, right? So are we making a profit on that, or are we just barely making it? Or is the budget putting in $400,000 a year for EMS services and we're getting back $390? I mean, that's my question.
I think it's hard to, hard to explain how many, the percentage that you take out of all of the staff. We're not just offering EMS service. We're a multi-service organization.
Well, I know, but we didn't used to offer ambulance service either.
We've always offered ambulance service. We have never not offered ambulance service.
Surprising, okay.
Back before Pro took over, we had a enterprise account that was set up to fund
Right.
the ambulance service, and then,
And that was a real adventure.
yeah, that kind of didn't quite keep up.
Right.
So
Well,
since then,
I remember that, that's what prompted my question.
yeah, and since then, I believe Bonnie takes a dollar figure and says that based on prior revenues, we will cover this in the budget, and that's how it's
I
done.
can back up a little bit to that grant time when the grant was received, and instead of yearly saying, okay, our percentage of the grant is going down, our budget needs to increase, the budget never increased, and that was run dry. It accounted for those two individuals that were added to the staffing, and the budget was never increased, and it should have been.
On the fringe benefits, we're talking about hiring 5 people. I'm thinking about OPEB, and these are public safety folks, so you're talking about retirement and medical in the retirement years. We're talking about a lot more than just for a clerk. We're talking about people that can retire at 80%. They retire 10 years younger than the average worker. That's been part of this projection for
I don't know how
fringe.
Chief came up with his fringe number.
We took the average, was it, correct me if I'm wrong,
Yeah.
is it that, 34%, I want to say. Is that roughly?
That's just the
That's how
standard
we-
benefits.
That's a standard.
Yeah, we
That's
really-
that's what we,
we really
that's
have
what we
to-
came
Your
up with.
Friends is short. It's a lot more than that.
Yeah.
And we had talked about also for all new employees, not just picking on you guys, adding the OPEB in, what it is, right up front, so we.
Right, so we
can-
know the
we
total
need
cost,
to
right?
really be realistic
That's
about
good,
that.
right.
So the other thing, just in terms of people, though, this is additive, right? So the EMTs that you have on board, they still have jobs, those don't go away? You still
Correct.
have a place for the EMTs?
Absolutely. It's a PB bus. There's a paramedic and a basic EMT on every truck. For our run volume, we're not required to have a double medic bus.
Okay.
So yes, nobody is going away. This is an addition. This gets us basically 3 people per shift on the rotation. That still leaves us understaffed for the run volume that we're doing right now. We still will heavily be relying on mutual aid for these additional calls.
Well, clearly, this is a decision for the selectmen to make whether they want to try to bring this forward or not. But I, for one, would like to see something a little different than we normally ask for, and that's a quarterly budget. And what that will do is the first couple quarters, I believe it'll show that it's all expense and no revenue, because they're going to be out for training, you're going to be setting it up, we're going to be spending capital. Sounds like the third quarter, you're going to start generating revenue from relative to what we're doing now, incremental revenue. And then the following quarter, it ought to be really kind of up and running. And then I'd like to see, again, quarterly, what you think the second year and maybe the third year even looks like. And then that would help us, I think, get comfortable with standing up in front of town meeting and asking for an incremental 100,000, 200,000, 300,000, I don't know, for the operating budget for that first year, because it's going to be paying for itself or better than paying for itself in year 2 or year 3. And I think if you do it sort of in a quarterly basis, you can explain the first quarter, they're at the academy. You explain the second quarter, they're doing whatever other training, or they're out doing whatever other stuff they have to be doing. The third quarter sounds like, okay, they're in the trucks, they're in the ambulances, they're running. The fourth quarter, they're running. And then the second year, it ought to be greased and really going.
For the revenue.
Yeah, I would think that would help us explain it to the townspeople.
Sure,
And
absolutely.
we could have that before we, as the thing goes forward, even before you go to the selectmen with it, I think would be useful.
And I think also with this sheet, I'm looking at yours and to steal it, this sheet here, you should skew this number to match up with what your projections are on your new proposal. So you said you went with 700. You should kind of show what 700 means here. So you're comparing apples to apples, because right now it doesn't look good, because there's a lot more than 700 on there.
That's what,
Point, Greg.
and again,
That's really
my
good.
math gets skewed.
That'll help you a lot.
I tend to jump to the numbers, and there's a bigger gap than probably is going to be there.
Right.
But using your numbers says there's going to be a bigger gap.
You should get a quicker payback then,
Right.
based on those projections, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so
Right.
it'll look better, it'll look more favorable.
So how does this work billing wise in this transition period where you're still kind of using the service you have now, but you're also got your own guys? I mean, can you have both going at the same time? How does that work?
The fee would change. So right now, we're in a contract, we would have to break away from the pro system, we would have to give them notice by December to say that they need 6 months' notice to the end of the fiscal year, that we will be withdrawing from the system. Then we would have to re-sign a fee schedule for, what they would charge us depending on the run.
We would still use them,
Right.
Even ongoing, just it'd still be another option?
Emergency,
Okay.
backup, whatever.
Yep, we'd have a mutual aid agreement with them just as well as Westford and Air. There are still incidents where they're used in Westford. when there's no.
But when you use
available-
Westford or Air, though, the billing is with, between the towns, and when the
Correct.
third guy, then that's a whole different, it works a whole different way, right?
Yes, it does.
Transport agency bills. So even though we call Westford, they get on our ambulance and go with our patient. So whoever delivers, that's who bills. But then we get,
Does the billing.
we'll get a bill from Westford saying, hey, you guys called us on the 16th of August and here's the fee.
Yeah. And you collect from the insurance company, you pay
But Pro's
them.
taking our run report and they're going after that revenue.
Right.
Well, you gotta sell this thing, and to us, we ask about all the numbers and what it's gonna cost and what the money coming back. But you gotta sell it at town meeting,
Yes.
and one of the things you need to do is, besides the numbers, is tell the people in the audience who might not be number crunchers what the benefit of this is gonna be for them. You
Absolutely.
gotta hit that hard,
Yep, the improved service to all of them. Right.
and why that is improved service.
Yes,
What's it mean to you when you had a heart attack?
absolutely.
Pick a couple of scenarios and say, this is what could happen, and this is what we're looking to alleviate. So you gotta sell it on both sides of that.
As a matter of fact, yesterday morning was the prime example of why this service would have made a difference. We picked up a guy on King Street that said he was having a heart attack. He was having chest pain. We put him in the ambulance. We met ALS en route. We were heading to Emerson. They put him on the monitor, U-turn, heading to Lowell. He was having a double heart attack. They took him right into the cath lab, put 2 stents in. Good, clear. I mean, they eliminated the problem. But that's something that we're on scene, we can put that monitor on. We're not gonna start to Emerson, we're going right to Lowell. And we know what's going on, you can see what's going on. But, I mean, that's probably one of the most amazing things that, opportunities that the guys have. They can actually wheel them right into the cath lab and watch it on the screen. They let them watch because it happens in minutes. And they go right in, they inject the dye, they can open up that blockage and say, oh, look at that, the vitals just changed, everything just changed, and it's instant.
I think a lot of people realize what a major hospital Lowell really is, right? The office services, I don't think a lot of
Yep.
people realize that.
Right.
One more question on the numbers. I also recommend that for your first 6 months, your first year, you break out the things that are really capital.
Yep.
Okay, because we're going to want to get that in a capital plan and not have it even part of the,
Right, but it should be part of the
yeah,
proposal.
yeah, it has to be part of the proposal, for sure, but you still
Because
want
that
to,
is an
be able to say.
incremental
There's going to be a lot of
expense
push
for
on
the
capital going forward. We need to know all the things that are there so people are making choices that they understand.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Right.
One other thing, I was just thinking about it, so if Acton comes online, now you have another option, right, as backup with Acton once
As
they come
backup,
online?
correct.
Do you think that there'll be a need to use this private service? If you've got Acton, Westford, and Air, and then ourselves? If we go there?
We would sign a mutual aid agreement to cover us. I mean,
Just in
the
case.
incidents that we have on the highway, it can range
Pro
from,
ambulance in traffic and they can hop right there
Absolutely.
rather than waiting for someone to try to fight through the traffic.
we could have a mass casualty incident where we need multiple ALS units. So, and we've done that before too. We've taken them from Lowell, Emerson, anywhere we can get them. And
Lately, you might as well
it
just
happens.
park a truck down on 495.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Unbelievable, the last couple of weeks.
Good for the numbers.
Unbelievable.
One more thing. Could you introduce yourself? I don't know if everybody else knows you, but I don't, so.
Hi, I'm Kim. I'm the executive assistant over at the fire
Okay,
department.
and you've been around for how long? Not that long?
Since February.
February. Very
So
good, so.
you run the joint.
Yeah,
I
it's
do my
very
best.
clear to make getting things done now.
If I may, for a selfish reason, there's also in that proposal is 4 lieutenants. You asked
Absolutely.
Chief King and Deputy Patterson if they could go with 2 patrolmen every shift and not have sergeants. That's how Scott and I work. We are on call every day, all the time, because we have no management below us. We have no one to say, hey, so-and-so's banged out tomorrow, can you fill the shift? I fill the shift. He fills the shift. We need another layer of supervisory. People
Works
that
for
we
me.
can delegate, you know? We can't delegate to anybody. We don't have anybody to delegate
Right.
to.
It's just,
All chiefs and
I
no
mean,
Indians.
24/7, 365, we are going. We are going to calls
Anyplace else you'd rather
several
be?
nights a week.
It's not me, it's the
it
other
doesn't
half
get
of my relationship that doesn't. It always sees when she says, are you doing the dishes? Oh, gotta go. Not on TV. No, she doesn't know, she's not.
Tom, keep up the good work.
Yeah.
Matt's looking for a couple of good men. Yeah.
I don't wanna do it.
He's not gonna change to the dark side.
No. I couldn't give anyone a ticket.
Okay, good. So realistically, though, as soon as you have that
Yeah.
P and L, if you will, let us know and come on back and let's, keep
Absolutely.
us sort of apprised of what that looks like. Because I think that the earlier we can get comfortable, the earlier we can put some numbers into our projections with Bonnie. And recognizing that, this is a program that's likely to go forward.
I'd like to see a cash curve also. I mean, a graph is kind of nice to look at. It's nice looking at a spreadsheet, but I think a graph can,
Well, that's fine. Yeah, expenses versus revenues, see where the crossover is.
What's your proposed time situation for this sequence?
If it could go through at Springtown meeting, we would like to try to go forward with this and at least begin the process, new fiscal
We're
year.
looking to pitch this at annual town
Spring
meeting.
or,
Correct.
or fall?
Fall town meeting.
Because if you've got to give
But you have to give pro.
6
Yes, we would have to give pro notice in December to get off
you need this for fall.
well, you need a special town meeting, right?
special town meeting in spring.
I mean,
No,
No.
No, you need it for fall.
in order to give pro.
Well,
We always have
what-
special town
we
meeting.
may be able to
November.
give them notice. I don't know if we get this through.
The first 6 months, you're not gonna be going off of them anyway, right? So that's why if you did in the spring, you still have the 6 months while you're starting up.
Right.
Yeah, when these guys are in
You
the
could-
academy, you're still using.
You could give them notice next December, in essence. We could, because if we got approval in spring, we start the hiring process in July, we're still using pro for almost another year, and you could give them notice in December of 17, and then,
That unfortunately, then all of the revenue is still going through to them till July of, the following July.
Give a notice in May.
You need to think about it
Okay,
because, whether you're gonna
It's
go for the fall
following,
town
so you
meeting.
need a 6-month advance notice before the end of the fiscal year. So May is too late.
Can you give
You're
them,
into the next year it'd be the following fiscal year.
can you give them a 6-month notice and retract it?
oh, just kidding.
They can't say. I mean, it's business to them, they'd have to say, yes, we'll take you back.
Right.
If something-
I believe that would be potentially be an option. Whether, they accepted us back at the same rate or not, we wouldn't know.
Yeah, they might say, oh, yeah.
There's just,
Cried wolf.
unfortunately, there's so much to the program right now that we're all in right now, and there's no wiggle room. Even including our training. Right now, they are technically supposed to be providing all of our training, be it online or live seminars. That program has been down for 7 months. We haven't been able to get training from them for 7 months. Yet we're paying a fee that we are unsure of exactly what we're paying for that. Every community is the same, and nobody has the exact number.
Sounds like you need it
They're
for a special
providing it.
town meeting in the fall.
Sounds like you need a lawyer.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Sounds like you need to move quicker than.
So, but if you're talking about fall, then I'm also thinking about, you guys are stretched thin as it is. You're building a new firehouse and you're starting up a major new program here. I mean, is this realistic that all that's gonna happen at the same time?
I mean, even if this was approved in the fall, it wouldn't be going through until next fall.
yeah, I would say even if, fall, we'd
You know,
still start until
it
July.
wouldn't be, if it was approved this fall, there would not be anything financially attached to this until the next budget season.
Planning, and I'm thinking your time and your effort and your attention to this.
Right.
Well, there's nothing that says if we go to town meeting in May and we ask the town to support this program, there's nothing that says we have to hire the people on July 1st.
Correct, right.
We could hire the people January 1st. And we're going to be doing all the training and all the other stuff up until July 1st about. And we could give Pro their notice in that time frame. So, we basically slide the program out 6 months, but it may fit the department's ability to implement it a little better, and it may fit the Pro contract a little better if we think of it that way. So when you come back, if you can give us sort of, what you think a start date
I like that.
that makes sense is.
Yeah, that
And
actually
if
fronts
Yeah.
the 6 months, the final 6 months of the fiscal year is being fronted by the town, and you're going into the new fiscal year with a program that is up and running.
Right.
Yeah.
So, think about it.
Right.
And, when you come back with the spreadsheet, think about what makes sense. What can you guys handle, number one? And number two, what makes sense from the town meeting that we should be supporting it, or the budget cycle that we should be supporting it in. So it may be that the first year, there's virtually no revenue, but it's our investment. The second year, we ought to expect a full-blown program up and running.
Right.
So when you come back, give us that timeline along with the quarterly budget that you should put together with Bonnie.
And we've got to look at dispatch as
Yeah.
well, how that fits
Yeah.
in.
Yeah, that's right. And I would just, if it's not going to be on the fall, that it's still on people's radar, because as we look at all these things that are going to come to fall town meeting, this needs to be part of the bigger picture again.
Yes.
Even though we now are voting on it then, it's still part of the picture.
Right. It definitely, even if it were to come to fall, if we were able to get the program together in time, at least we would be able to show that there wouldn't be any financial costs in this portion of the, in this budget cycle. And maybe even not into the last half of the next.
Okay, good. Any other
Okay.
questions?
No? It's got potential.
Great. No, it sounds like an interesting program, but again, from our standpoint, it comes down to what financial choices we have to make on the short term versus what's long-term good.
Right.
And it looks like if it's a $600,000 program, a half to two-thirds of it is funded up front because you've got the capital nut plus half a year's salaries and fringes
Right.
that we're going to have to fund. And if we do that, that's money that we don't have for other departments that first year. So we have to figure that out. Okay, good.
Thank you.
Great. So when you're ready, get on our docket again and come back.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Yeah. Keep these guys in line.
I try, I do what I
Okay.
can.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Low maintenance.
Okay.
You want us to come with the new fire truck in a couple weeks, go for a ride before we have the meeting?
Ooh.
We can get the whole committee on it.
The whole committee?
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
plenty
gee.
of places to put people.
You guys gonna do a raffle for the sliding down the pole?
That's a different thing. That would be gaming, first of all. Steve's here, you can't do any of that stuff.
I know Joe wants to be the first.
Yeah, yeah.
If we do that, we have to post it, because if we have a quorum,
All right.
in order for the open meeting law, we have to post it.
We'll have to have minutes, so you'll have to come along.
Yeah, Marilyn can drive.
Marilyn, you're right, right.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks,
All right,
guys.
guys.
Thank you. All righty.
You know what I failed to do, as I opened up the meeting, was recognize that we've got Gary Wilson on as our newest member. And welcome him.
Welcome, Gary.
Thank you.
And I apologize for not being here to welcome you myself, but Route 2 stinks at night. I was in Waltham and It was an hour to get here, it was amazing.
Yep.
It's just
117
unbelievable.
is no better for us.
Okay, the next agenda item we had was the budget and finance update that Bonnie was going to do, and she didn't give you anything to present. Did she give you the debt service slides? Okay, what I asked Bonnie to do was to put together a presentation on debt service for us. We've got a couple of really big nuts coming on board. The fire station, which at last count was pushing 9 million, it was like 8.8 million, the last numbers that were thrown around, up from 7, which we were planning on. We've got Alumni Field coming on in the fall town meeting, I believe. I know they're aiming at it. Whether they'll have all their ducks in a row to actually come to town meeting, I don't know. But that's in the range of $2 to $2.5 million is my guess. But that's sort of what I'm hearing on the jungle drums. And what I wanted Bonnie to present was, what does our debt service look like and projected debt service with these projects going forward? And are there any creative ways that we can look at funding? We've got a couple million in capital stabilization.
Some stuff coming off pretty soon, too.
I'm sorry, what?
Don't we have some stuff coming off?
Yeah, but not as much as you might think. But yeah, let's look at that's why I wanted to look at it. And, you know, like I said, we were planning on a $7 million fire station. If it's a $9 million fire station, what's the incremental $2 million look like on debt service? And we've got, you know, the library folks wanting to do something, whether we can afford to do that or we can't, whether we can do that inside or outside, I don't know. So I just thought it'd be worthwhile having them give us an overview, just to bring everybody up to speed as to what debt service looks like going into the next budget cycle, okay? So Steve, if you have.
Yep.
Do you have hard copies for us or not? Or we can
No,
get,
no.
okay, we can get it going forward.
Yeah, these
Send those
around, these numbers are pretty
electronically.
small.
Okay. No,
Big numbers, but
Big-
small.
big-
Send us those electronically.
Let's see, as big as I
I
can.
feel like I'm at the drive-in theater, eh?
I feel like I'm at the movie theater, I got the front seat.
Yeah, right, you can see, okay.
So this has,
Okay,
so you can see them, yeah? Okay. So these are all the components that we were looking at previously. So we have existing inside debt service that's non-excluded. You can see it runs out in FY '23 right now.
Okay, so FY16, we've got let's see, we're in FY17.
17.
So let's use 17. We're paying in this year's budget $639,640,000
And
Non-excluded.
inside 2.5. We're spending 1.8 million in excluded. And the excluded are the
Police station, middle school, Russell Street,
Russell Street. And I think
and a
that,
couple of land purchases. that we've
okay,
done.
right, okay. So those are relatively new,
Yes.
right? I mean, the oldest one is the police station. so-
And they'll
I mean,
run
that
out.
number does go down some, but it doesn't go down much.
Right, but.
It's
but-
still in the early stages of the debt, so the payments are a lot more.
Right, but the excluded debt service, the taxpayers should expect that as that goes away, it goes away. We aren't spending it. It's not available for the town to spend.
Right.
It's external to the Prop 2.5.
One of the things,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Steve.
show it in this chart here, one of the things that the selectmen looked at, and this is an older version of Excel, so when I take this out, I actually have to remove it, I can't uncheck it. This is the original chart that the selectmen were looking at their last meeting. And what they decided, one of the previous boards, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, they were looking at FY14 as kind of the worst-case scenario. The green is the excluded debt. And they were saying that at that 2.5 level, or whatever it is, somewhere between $2.5 and $3 million total, that is the most burden that we should inflict upon the taxpayer. What's included there is inside and outside debt service. So what they were looking at when they were planning the fire station, for example, and the other projects that are coming on, is to keep that debt service around that $2.5 million level. However, they're talking about, and I haven't heard them say at all that these new projects would be excluded. They're talking about all inside the levy.
Okay.
So to compare debt service that's inside the levy, that's going to be going inside the levy, and saying this is the burden for the taxpayer, and showing the excluded debt service is not accurate, because the
Right.
excluded debt service goes away. What the plan has been is, as this red piece goes down, that's the inside levy
Right,
debt service, it flows into capital.
right.
So when Bonnie and I were discussing this, the better solution to look at everything is looking at the inside debt service
Plus capital.
and capital.
Right.
So let me switch this chart one more time here. So now this shows capital spending and the inside debt service. And instead of using FY14 as the base in this case, you could look at exactly what we did in FY17, because we're already supporting that amount of capital, combination of capital and debt service inside the levy now. So there's no reason to go back to 14. You could look at what's being done right now. So what this chart does, it starts adding Alumni Field, it starts adding the fire station, it starts adding some of the library. All inside this levy, and all, as you can see, as we place some of the debt, it starts going up. And let's look at the numbers here in a
How-
second.
Well, okay, but. okay,
Because
so
there's a
How do you say
plan
it's
to go
inside the
along
levy? I
with
don't
this.
understand that, but,
Pardon?
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, Betsy, I couldn't hear you.
I don't understand how you say it's inside the levy if it's way higher than it is now.
This is just to show what the debt service is. I'm not saying that we can support it inside the levy. I'm saying this is what the effect would be. So in FY17, what we're supporting in the levy right now is here.
Right, so. if-
With the extra components, you can see it's going up.
Right. So, in FY 18.
So it might be easier to look at the numbers.
So 21 looks like is when you're bonding.
So in FY17,
Yeah.
if this is the base year, this $3.3 million is a combination of the capital plan and the inside debt.
Right.
That's the 3.3. If we say that that's the base,
Right,
and we're looking to add Alumni Field, the library, fire station, and town hall renovations, because that goes along with the new library. If all those things get added in, which are these four top numbers, along with our capital plan right here, this would be the total spending for the year. This is the shortfall or overage for that year. So in the first year, according to these numbers, we'll be paying $3.8 million as opposed to the base of 3.3, so it's an extra $500,000 that we would have to come up with inside the levy if these projects move forward.
So Steve, as far as, excuse me, as far as the library is concerned, is this the worst-case scenario you have plugged in for fiscal year 18?
Yes, that this is,
Because that's probably never going to happen.
so we have right now,
I mean,
there's
it's not going to
three
happen
different
that early.
scenarios that we're having here. So there's three different tabs we're gonna show. Alumni Field basically starts right away. In discussing this kind of what's been going on is an underlying plan to fund Alumni Field through the capital stabilization money that was put aside. An alternative would be to short-term borrow that $2.3 million. Pay it off over, in this case, 6 years.
Right.
Our powers got expanded with the municipal bill that was just signed to increase the number of years we can short-term borrow up to 10 years now instead of having to bond. So showing this scenario that in FY '18, we're going to be starting the borrowing, starting the construction phase. For the firehouse, same thing, FY '18, we start the short-term borrowing at $6 million. We short-term borrow until FY '20, and then we'll bond the issue up here for the full $8.9 million that the estimate is now.
So the rate you're saying you think you can get for our long-term is close to 5%?
Very conservative, yeah.
So maybe better than that,
I would think it'd be a lot better than that.
Well, we're talking,
long-term.
Oh, long-term.
FY
sorry,
20.
Sorry, long-term.
we're talking also placing the debt in FY '21.
Oh, so who knows?
So who knows what's going to happen?
But we could look at the numbers at, say, 4 and 5 and see what the difference is. And then I guess the question I would have, are we better off paying cash for alumni, or are we better off taking that cash and putting it against a 5% or 4% bond?
Right.
It depends
So
on-
we can go into those
Instead of
details, so.
borrowing 9 million, we borrow 7. I mean, somebody, they
So
can
the-
run the numbers and make it look, are you better
Makes it,
off?
yeah, makes it look better.
Because if we can really get short-term money at 2% or 2.5%, do you want to pay 2% for your money, or you want to
Or
pay
pay
5%?
or more, who knows?
Right. So I think that, now's the time to start talking about this, so that we can at least make our recommendations to the selectmen on town meeting as to how we fund these projects. Because,
2% is nothing for interest. I mean, it's really not a lot of, it's not a big amount of money that you're paying out in interest.
Probably
So
less.
so we just
inflation rate of
issued
the
a
project
ban.
over-
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about it, I mean, you get a note for a couple of points, that's kind of a no-brainer.
And, I mean, that's why we've jealously guarded the AAA rating.
I know.
And, anybody that says anything against that needs to have the head wrapped,
Head checked.
Yep.
because it's real money.
And again, these rates are pretty conservative. We just placed some debt yesterday. We issued a ban. For a one-year ban, we got 90 basis points.
Jesus.
Pretty soon they're gonna be paying us to take them.
That's up. That's up from last year. Last year was 70 basis points. so.
So it is up a little, short-term bonds up a little.
So let's go through these, I just want to walk you through the logic here. Library, again, this is an aggressive schedule for the library, starting in the same time period as the fire station, FY '18. And then the townhouse renovation starts 2 years after that. So after the construction's done at the library, they move their quarters out, then this building would need some money to redo that space.
Number I heard at the library the other night was way more than that.
I agree. It was.
16 million, the number was thrown out that meeting the other night.
You were
Right,
pushing.
so here's
But that's the total cost.
here's the total cost. So
Okay.
their estimate, whatever they wanted to call it,
Okay,
was $15.5 million
Okay.
for the slope site. According to the program, furniture, fixtures, and equipment aren't part of the reimbursement, and they showed $2.2 million of that, of non-reimbursable costs on that plan.
50%
So that
Okay,
brings
all
it
right,
down to
okay.
13. 50% comes in from the state
Add
is
the two back in.
6.6.
Okay,
So
all right.
our net is 8.8. I
Okay.
bonded it for 8.9.
oh, that all, okay then, in that
Okay.
case.
Boy, I could sleep better tonight.
Right?
That's only twice what they projected when they started talking about this. Oh, it cost the town 4 million, that's all, you know?
So that's the numbers with that, and just a
Okay,
plain old estimate on townhouse, Bonnie.
but the
Want to throw
townhouse,
in
you're tying to the
1.5 million.
library though, right? Because if the library doesn't happen, then the town.
Well, that goes away,
And
yeah.
that goes away, so
So-
really, those
so
two
it-
should almost be together,
So that it's really the 9
That adds
million.
another-
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
I think that the
I think that's
plan
right.
would be to possibly get the appropriation for both at the same time, so you can see that they're joint projects, but the actual fiscal bonding of the money
Be
would
separate.
happen separately.
So where did the number for the retrofit of the existing building come from?
Just an estimate that Bonnie wanted to use, $1.5 million.
Okay.
So my question, can we go up and look at the capital number? Because my concern with all this is that we can continue to fund capital at the same level we are now.
Okay, so
That
let's.
we're not
let's get
doing this,
into
we're not taking away
Let's-
from maintenance of our
Let's look at
current
these
assets.
numbers
We
here.
cannot
So
do that.
This is the capital spending plan that is in Bonnie's worksheets currently. Okay?
It does go down.
So we're not,
Goes up, then it goes down.
this is based on the capital plan that the department heads give. They do a 10-year plan each year. So this is the actuals based on the last budget cycle that she's entered.
And this includes basically run rate on the facilities capital.
Yes.
Which, Steve, it's what, 700,000 a year, 500,000 a year ballpark?
I think it's around 7, yeah.
Around 7.
Yeah, but that leaves us with a lot of deferred projects.
Yeah.
Right.
7 is not doing it.
No, we'd
That
probably
was my
need twice
point
that,
before,
at
is that
least.
The same way with, the same question I have on streets is, we had a study done on streets saying, when we've spent 900 to $1 million a year on streets, and that has allowed streets, since 2005, to go from a rating of 74 down to a rating of 65. So what I'd like to hear from, I think it was Northeastern University that did the study on streets, if we plug in the 10-year plan that the selectmen just looked at and approved by shifting some projects around, another 5 years from now, are we gonna be, is our rating gonna slide beyond, down to 60 or 55? Or are we gonna maintain at the 65 rating, or does that take us back up a little bit? And, I'd like to hear that from the consultant, because it may be that we really should be spending more on roads.
Could be, yeah.
So the numbers are getting bigger than a bread box here, and I think we need to push back a little bit on what we're gonna do from debt service and what we're gonna ask the taxpayers to do.
Now, does this
So-
presuppose, Steve, that we're gonna do all these projects inside the levy?
That's the current feeling we're
Your
getting from the Board
numbers
of
are,
Selectmen.
is that we can do
All
this?
inside.
This is the current feeling from the Board of Selectmen.
No,
that
I know
everything
the
will
Board
be
of
done
Selectmen.
inside
I'm
the
saying-
levy.
You talking about the
You
library
guys
and
who do the
everything?
numbers, can,
No, not everything.
Those spread
Okay,
out.
but Yeah, but this is
We're
important.
trying to.
I understand even
we're
what
trying
you're
to-
saying, but I'm
to-
not saying, you can't say
To come up with a
everything.
plan
Right.
to do what we can inside the levy.
And that,
So part of this, let me just show you what we did here, is the current value of the capital stabilization account right now is the $2.9 million. And I talked about the shortfalls that we had in the years, or the overages in the years. If we used the capital stabilization fund to fund that shortfall, to keep the capital at the current levels that Bonnie has estimated,
Yeah.
takes us out 3 years, right?
we can come out to this level.
Yeah.
So FY '22, we start to go negative. The second tab here, this pushes the library out to bond in FY '23. Keeps everything else the same. We last all the way out to FY '25 now.
It's probably a little more realistic.
Right. The third tab pushes it out one more year, FY '24. And you can see we're okay all the way out beyond FY '26.
And that, in your numbers, you're assuming a relatively short-term borrow for alumni,
Yep,
5 or 6 years,
yep,
and that's covered in here.
yep.
Okay.
So as
So,
you,
so if we say that this chart's a little bit more realistic, and we still run out in FY '25, there's two ways to fund that, basically. We're saying that in this scenario, we're never contributing anything else to capital stabilization, which probably isn't true because we're always going to generate enough free cash, hopefully generate enough free cash, that we can start putting some extra dollars into capital stabilization
You've done that through this.
to keep that. No, this
You don't know.
is
just
keeping this,
capital.
keeping that 2.9 million and pushing it out.
Right.
So one way to do it is to say, okay, can we run through that equation for free cash, have enough staying in there and still be able to fund something into capital stabilization to protect us in those out years? That's number one. Number two is, do we actually spend all that capital each year? I mean, there's some
That's always the
years that
question.
we
Right.
haven't, and we've been able to put some of those funds into stabilization. So there's two ways that we could possibly protect out in those out years.
Well, but none of these numbers include any land purchases,
True,
right?
true.
There's at least a couple on the table now.
Well, yeah, but that's my point.
right.
And
CPA gonna fund some of it?
CPA can
Some.
fund one more
One more.
without incrementally putting the 300,000 or 400,000 in a year that we've been able to do the last couple of years to get the full 3% match instead of the 1% match from the state. So again, I think a full sort of pro forma needs to be done so that we could see, can we afford to continue to fund CPA the way we've been doing it, to get the 3% match, which has generated a little more than an incremental $200,000 from the state, Gary. So the reason to do that is to get the incremental match back from the state. And so that's been worth a little over $200,000 a year back from the state.
That's not going away. That we,
No promises.
Probably.
No promises. But,
What
you know,
number-
take it as long as
Right.
we can get it. Yep, sorry.
What number are you using for the annual budgets that increase every year for the town budget? What
In,
percentage increase? Because
The
that goes
projections?
up every year.
right,
For the town's expenses?
yeah.
Okay.
Because I just go, "Bleh, I've been here before.
Right, because,
You know,
yeah,
I
hear ya.
funded a brand-new high school inside the levy and spent the next 10 years raising taxes every year because we didn't have any money to run the town.
So when we're in this scenario right here with the aggressive schedule, and you have these years like this where stabilization runs out, it's kind of the same scenarios we were at with the high school. The way we got out of that was some of that capital needs went to capital exclusions until we were able to build up enough funds.
Right.
And then-
That's a third way to get out of this scenario, which,
Right, we don't want to get back into the capital exclusion route,
Exactly.
but that was the only tool
We have to
we
keep in
had.
mind, Fred, that Steve and the finance team has got the selectmen say, we want to do this, this, and this, show us how it can be done. That's one thing. Whether it should be done that way is our business. And no. We've been there before. You cannot fund everything under the levy,
so if
inside the levy.
if library went away from inside the levy, and we continued on that plan, there's no issues at all.
Well, the issue is still there for the taxpayer.
The taxpayer
Because that's on top
would bear
of
the
the-
burden, yes,
Right.
absolutely.
So it may be that it wouldn't all have to go outside.
One of the things that we've made clear to the selectmen on many occasions is that even if we got the exclusion vote on things, we would try to pay as much inside the levy as possible, but you still have that flexibility to take some of it out when you need to.
Well, but there's some people on the Board of Selectmen that don't want to buy that.
Absolutely.
I've had that argument across the board.
We've heard it several times.
Yes.
We have. I feel real strongly, especially if we're going to try to do more of this stuff inside, that we keep that capital funding where it is, and that capital stabilization fund is not used for other things, that it's available, so that we don't run into the situation where we're doing all this other stuff, that we really can use it as a stabilization fund. And I think the other thing that people need to realize, because people keep talking about it's just capital, not just, but it's capital, it's not operating. But the fact is that we're doing things in there now. There's funding we've added for Park and Rec. The schools have hundreds of thousands of dollars and stuff that used to be in their operating budget that's in capital now. If we have to squeeze that, the operating budgets are going to get squeezed. And so people need to be realistic about this.
I think that the way this schedule is working, especially in, again, to this schedule where the library's pushed out a couple of years, is that we have that $3.8 million. And we have the availability of the capital stabilization. We're not letting any of the operating budget into these numbers.
Yep.
And we're not exceeding what we can pay, put it that way, from that base. Because we have that capital stabilization to help us out. It's keeping that capitalization fund at a level where it can fund all those shortfall
And
years.
that presupposes,
That's the
like
thing.
you said, that free cash every year
Is
is
regenerated,
sufficient that we can regenerate that capital stabilization fund.
yes,
And that's by pushing it out to 2020, is that correct?
yes. So
That's fiscal 2020,
the other thing that,
which is basically a year earlier, 6
Couple
months
years
That
earlier.
happens a
Couple
year
years away,
earlier.
yeah, I know.
the other thing that Fred
A long
mentioned
time ago, it's
was
not that far away.
taking capital stabilization and paying the fire station. So you're not bonding as much. So if I was to take this capital stabilization money, say it's $2.5 million, we can take out.
We'll pick all of it.
And we do this. So now we're borrowing 6.4 million. And in this one scenario, where we were good until FY '24, I believe. Right away, we're no,
Post in a couple of years.
Right.
So I'd like to go back to what Alan was talking about. I mean, what are you suggesting with these big capital projects, the 2.5 overrides, or Is that how we fund them versus trying to do them inside the levy, or not do them at all?
Certainly, if the town thinks they need a new fire station, or if they think they need a library, then pay for it.
Versus trying to bury it in the.
Yeah, and try, well, you just, you cripple the operating budget for years when you do these things. Because nothing ever works out the way everybody likes it to. And then next year, there will be a favorite project that will pop up that everybody will get on board, we're gonna do this one too. And that happens every year. Now, we can certainly say that, like Steve said, as we have money coming off, we may only borrow 6 million instead of 8 million and pay part of that inside the levy because we have the extra funds to do it. But to just lay all your cookies under the levy and then cripple the operating budget 2 years out or after we spent, the last 6 years building up capital and now adding maintenance, things we've needed for 20 years, why put that at risk? It has the added benefit of if you go outside the levy, everybody gets to vote. And we find out that it's not just the 300 people that the
That's the
library
risk.
brought in to town meeting to vote for the library, when you've got all these other folks out there that say, wait a minute, I'd rather see the fire department come up with all these guys than a new library. We don't need that, or we don't need this, or we don't need that one. But at least you get the voice of what people are willing to pay
People come
for.
out with a vote.
I agree.
That might be a good angle to increase voter participation as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that's why we came up with that scheme, seriously, was, for a.
You know how town meeting goes, when
Oh,
these
yeah.
things come up, if it's for the
Stack the
schools,
decks.
200,000 people show up to vote for that one issue and then they go home.
Yeah.
And then the next 25 people left vote $9 million worth of stuff. Well, the same thing will happen with the fire station, library, whatever you come up with.
And, there's another positive angle to going outside too, because I think when you do that, then people really have to make a case and go out and sell it to the town. Whereas now, what you feel is a lot of polarization going on instead. You're in or you're out.
Internal
As opposed
politics.
to saying, how do we really sell this? How do we make it so that people really do understand the benefit? Which is really where we need to be, right? I mean, the idea that if people are afraid to vote at town meeting because somebody's going to see them and then they're going to, all that stuff that goes on. The townwide, the voting and just making people go out and, there are benefits for all of these things that are on the table.
of course.
There are real benefits, so you just sell it, make your case and go out to the public and sell it.
And make your case.
And don't go try to make some deal behind this, that's what makes people feel uncomfortable, right?
Right.
Yeah, I think if you
This-
put all three of them on the docket at one time, though, it's gonna make people nervous, like,
But-
the library's gonna look so ridiculous
Well, the-
compared to the other two that, wow, let's
The
just
library,
wait.
But
the
it's their-
library
but it's the
application
town's
doesn't
money.
go in
They deserve
until
to make that
January
call.
of next year.
Sorry.
The library application doesn't even go in until January of next
Yeah,
year.
we've already,
So why is it going in?
fire station is gonna go.
Yeah.
And we'll probably do short-term borrowing for Alumni Field.
I know.
Yeah. So the people need to look at these things.
I don't disagree with you, that's why I asked you to expand on it. Yep.
Part of we've lived through this as a town before, when we did the high school. And using the capital stabilization fund in this manner is exactly the plan that we had using regular stabilization back then. And initially, in the first couple of years prior to construction of the high school, we were able to put within the budget pretty large sums of money aside in stabilization to help pay for that debt service. Unfortunately, we didn't segregate the monies as we do today. And there was other spending needs that came in, and little by little, we couldn't keep that funding going into stabilization. And then we started to borrow a lot more for other things inside because of the pressures, and it snowballed.
Yeah.
And once we stopped funding stabilization, then the whole plan just
Fall apart.
fell apart. And 2 years after we placed that bond, we needed an operational override, because we just couldn't fund things.
See, some of the.
Theoretically, though, if we were able, and had shown some restraint and did things back then, yeah, it could have worked better than it did.
There's also a feeling, though, that because so much money was being put in that stabilization fund to pay for that, that maintenance was being neglected that should have been being done. And we paid for that probably double
Well-
down the road as well, right? So that's why.
Back then, we
Very
didn't
important.
have the capital
I know.
spending, we didn't have the
I know.
road maintenance we do today.
we're
It's
doing
because of putting those policies in place, which resulted from the high school, and segregating that debt service money and letting it flow directly to capital, that we were able to institute all these things.
We took the lesson to heart. Now we have really good funding for capital. We're doing maintenance that we weren't doing before. We've got a 10-year road program. Before it was just, well, maybe we could scrape up enough money to do this road this year. Now we've got all these things going because we learned the lesson.
Right.
So can something like this
Duh.
work? Yeah, it almost can, except for those final couple of years on that schedule.
Well, I mean, because you do have some debt coming off now, which you didn't have in that case. So there is some funding in there available.
Well, we had no, back then, we didn't have any restraint to say this debt service is going to stay into this bucket.
I
No,
see.
It flowed into
I
the
see.
operating
It went for free.
One big.
It flowed wherever. So it goes into the operating budget and starts compounding, and then you run into
And
issues.
every year, there was
Right.
something that came up that everybody wanted to do
Right.
something with.
And we were increasing debt service at that time.
The reason why I asked about the operating budget is that happened every
Right.
time too.
Well,
The operating
But
budget
as long
increases
as
every
long
year
as
that you
there's
have the union
restraint.
contracts come up.
Right.
As long as there's restraint, it could work. Personally, I still think there's a debt exclusion vote that needs to be taken, and you have the flexibility to cover these shortfall
3
years.
years ago, the fire station might have been there. Alumni Field would not have been there. There was nothing in there about turf fields. There was nothing about a library. None, just 3 years ago, none of that stuff was on there. So,
Well, and
Absolutely.
what's not in these numbers is no conservation land. You heard Steve say, we just keep pushing out maintenance programs. One of these days, something's gonna blow up on us. So, and.
Senior center, there's
and-
still talk of senior
on the
center.
like 1.5
select priority
million.
list now, right?
Right.
The
and
senior center is coming up. People are starting to make a big push on that because seniors have felt like they've been in the back of the bus for 25 years.
Well, and that's how the library people feel.
sure.
Rightly or wrongly, that's how they feel now, and they want their piece of the pie. So, I think what
Always
what
be
has
more.
been presented, what has been presented, I think, is sort of it's a reasonable look at how we should be thinking about
Yep.
debt service. But realize there's more out there lurking in the weeds, that doesn't make this any better, it makes it worse. So if we don't get our arms around it as we go into this budget cycle, it could get really nasty. So, we've got fields that aren't being taken care of.
Well,
Well,
they're not being taken care of to the level that they
Right.
need to be taken care of.
Well,
Jimmy's doing what he can with
well,
what he's got.
no knock on Jim. We haven't given him any money to take care of the
He
fields.
doesn't have the resources necessary to do
The
it.
selectmen didn't allow them to hire the people that the study said he should hire to take care of the fields. And the weather gods have,
Created a dust
put the,
bowl.
the whole area is a dust bowl. And with alumni coming on board, I mean, I really believe that no matter what they come back with for alumni, it absolutely should not be approved without an ongoing maintenance budget to support it.
Yeah, in all the fields.
Absolutely.
Yeah, in all the fields.
I mean, I
Absolutely.
just, or we're gonna have a mess on our hands 5 years from now. After spending $2 million on it. So, you've got the paramedics thing that could cost the town $300,000 or $400,000 the first year. You've got fields that are under-maintained, so I don't know what that is, $50,000, $100,000. So now that's $400,000. And Lord knows what else is gonna come up in this budget cycle. So right off the bat, there's a $400,000 nut that we're probably gonna be looking at, that we didn't look at last year. And then with these big capital projects coming at us. So it's not gonna be, it's not gonna be an easy budget cycle coming up, is my guess.
I disagree. I agree with Alan, and the point is, with these large capital projects, it should be debt exclusions, you gotta vote it in. And let's hear what the town has to say.
Yeah.
And that should be our recommendation to the selectmen.
And pay for whatever we can inside.
Fine,
If we can,
absolutely.
if we can fund some of it inside, so be it, but at least have the approval, so that gives us the flexibility.
Flexibility, right,
And then you get a true gauge as to what the town wants.
right,
And if you want that to go through, you better go out there and sell it.
right.
Yeah.
No, I mean, that's what we've been saying for a while.
The last 3 exclusion votes, we handle the debt service all inside the levy.
Okay.
Go out and, town should decide. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, if it can be handled, but that gives us a gauge as to what the town really wants
Mm-hmm.
to. I mean, if the town's saying no debt exclusion, then why should we do the project?
Right.
And I don't have a feel on any one of the 3, whether the town as a whole wants them or not. I don't know. But you will find out once you put it on a ballot and take it to a vote.
Yep. I agree. Okay, anything
And
else?
that
Steve?
is the town's written policy.
That's the written policy, too.
Right.
And it's just common sense, anyway. The big things should go out. I mean,
Absolutely.
they just should.
So,
It's the right
Do all,
thing to
do
do.
all 3 of them come up at the same time then? That's the.
Well, 2 will,
Two
Two
go
will,
with the field.
maybe. I don't know if the
Well,
field will be ready for
if-
fall.
It might
If
Really?
if we decide that the way we're going to fund this is the correct way, that's going outside of levy, then one of those 2, and probably the library, will just back off for another year, or maybe 2 years.
Well,
So if you don't go-
library's at least 4 years out.
Yeah, so you wouldn't necessarily
if
end
you're
up
getting-
going with 2 of them at the same time,
Yeah.
If we get a yes on all 3, then we'd be in the same boat.
But I mean, the town has made those calls. I remember when, I don't know which, if it was Russell Street, one of the schools really needed some things to get done, and the police station clearly needed to be replaced. But the word was just the school has to come first. The police is just, I mean, that was just, they just said it. You're just gonna have to wait a year or 2, and they did it, and then it happened. And that, I think people appreciate when you're just honest with them and just, you know,
We
make
just
some
can't
calls.
afford to do it this way, you know?
Make some priorities and
So
go.
you make your case, right.
So, Mr. Chairman, I
Okay.
think we need to somehow, some way let the selectmen know that, it's our recommendation, or at least, or take a straw poll here. Seems like that's what we've got, that it's our recommendation that, these large capital projects be put into 2.5 override debt exclusion, that we have to vote it.
Is that a motion?
And, yeah, I'll make it as a motion,
Yeah,
if that's,
You know, that we recommend that we adhere to the guidelines as
Our
written.
policies,
that's-
absolutely,
right.
it's
per our
really gonna amount
policies,
to.
per our
Because
policies.
that's our policy now, don't change it.
Yeah. And
Would that include alumni field?
yeah, I think, I don't know what the threshold is dollar-wise, but, certainly, if it's a $2.5 million nut, that's a pretty big nut.
I mean, the track went I mean, that was, what, a few hundred thousand?
700,000.
700,000. And it went that way. Why wouldn't we handle this the same way?
Right.
They should all be handled that way. And that gives us the option, whether we want to fund it within the levy limit.
Yeah, as much
or
as we
not,
can.
It gives us options. It puts us in a better financial position.
Okay, so,
All right, so I don't know how to clean that motion up.
Greg, so what I've got down, so you can think about what you want to change. Greg moved to let the BOS know that it is our recommendation, meaning the Finance Committee's recommendation, that these large capital projects be put into an override debt exclusion that has to be voted on per our policies. Now, is there anything else you want me to add?
I don't know how
in?
you get that out of that.
I don't know how you got that out of there, but it sounds pretty darn good.
Well, so let me ask a question about the field. So how did you, the field was the only one that you could put on the short loan like you did? You didn't do that with anything else, the fire station or?
I mean, those projects are just too large to keep handling that way.
Right, so that's what I'm trying to find out, why, do they all get treated the same when we're talking about how?
I mean, we could certainly,
It didn't, I'm just saying,
So
when you
switch
did the
the
field, it
field
didn't look like
into a bond.
anything, but when you put the library play, it was a big deal. When we threw that on there, how far, if we pushed it out. But even if we're gonna do it, is it an all or nothing thing? That's kind of what I said before, when we're talking about, putting it to vote with the town. Is it to all three of these projects? Does
Individual.
it make
No, they'd be
sense?
individual items. They have to be individually,
Okay.
Yeah.
individual votes, absolutely.
So Steve, when you have the library in out years, I can't really read the numbers here.
that,
But do you escalate the number? In other words, if you have it in 2017 for $8 million, is it $8 million 4 years out? or
I
do you
think
escalate
in
it?
their projections that they come up, there was an
There's an escalation.
escalation in there. I
Yeah.
think it was 4 years that they
Okay.
put in there. It was,
Because it will escalate.
Oh, it will escalate, no doubt about
it
it.
was-
Yeah.
It
But that's
seems the most
included in- I
reasonable
used
that
the
alumni can be
inflated
done
number.
within the
Okay.
levy limit, but we still should, I still think we should take them to a vote.
Well, and the thought process there was to get more people out to vote on major projects. You know, next year, there's $1.5 million fire truck in the capital plan.
Yeah, it's inside, I thought it was outside.
$1.5 million truck.
Is this going to be seconded by someone?
That should
Oh,
be a vote. And we'll probably fund that inside, but do the people want it? Instead of, a normal annual town meeting has fewer than 300 people there. We have 6,000 registered voters.
I kind of look at it as equipment as a little different. I mean, it is a very expensive piece of equipment, but it's still, that's kind of something that should be done inside, but when you're talking
I
about
second Greg's motion.
You'll second it? Okay.
Okay?
large projects.
Okay, so we have
Motion on the
motion
floor.
and second to recommend to
You want me
the...
to read it again?
Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks.
Greg Champney moved to let the Board of Selectmen know that it is the Fincom recommendation that these large capital projects be put into an override debt exclusion that has to be voted on. Now, I think, do you want to add like voted on by the townspeople or the town
Well,
citizens?
Debt exclusion
the debt
automatic.
exclusion is automatic. It needs 2 votes. It needs a town meeting
Yeah.
vote and it needs
Okay.
a ballot
Per
vote.
our policies,
Right,
seconded.
just
Per
a
the
debt-
town's financial
For the
policies.
town's
Per the
financial
towns, okay.
Right.
policy.
Ours, the town's.
So just put a debt exclusion vote.
Do we need to specifically call out to include the alumni field? I don't know
Want me
if
to
some people
put
think
the
that that's
3 out?
separate than the other ones or not. And no,
I
you
just
don't think so?
Large capital
Okay.
projects, I mean, that's a large capital
Okay.
project.
That's fine.
I think that,
Okay, what she said. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, it's unanimous.
Yay.
Nobody's opposed.
Do we,
Okay.
is the current thinking now still that alumni field will be funded out of capitalization, the stabilization fund as opposed to the other, do you know? Because I wonder if we should go on record as saying
That was the
that's
conversation
fine.
in the selectmen
I've
it's
heard.
small enough that it could be, and especially if we do a short-term borrow on it for 2% interest or whatever, it seems like that's kind of a no-brainer. But I think.
But it's one or the other.
I think we need to follow the policies with these large capital projects, and it does I think it does 2 things for us. It gives us more options, and it also gives us a good gauge as what the town wants.
Right.
Yeah.
Great.
If they want, they'll
Just-
vote it through, and I
It's
think,
more transparent.
what I see with alumni, I think there's enough support out there to probably push it
No, I
right through
think
the
so, I
fall.
agree, I
I
agree.
agree.
But at least it gives everybody a say in what's going on.
Yep.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Yeah, I see the merit of just about all the things that are coming up. I can see good things about it.
Right.
I just have a difficulty on how you're gonna fund it.
And how the taxpayers.
There's no free lunch, guys. Somewhere, somebody's gotta end up paying.
Yeah, it definitely squeezed us for a
And-
few years if we did all three.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
But I can tell you on social media, before the last town meeting, there was a lot of talk about, we have this money and we can do
It's
stuff
free.
for free because we have the stabilization fund.
It's
And that
free.
was a lot of, we can do it for free.
Yeah.
And so you have to counter that, that it's, you know,
Not free, and it, I mean, that's,
it's money either way, and either you're spending it for this or you're borrowing it elsewhere. So you have to be real
Okay.
clear on that. Anyway,
okay, moving right along.
yep.
Yeah, we'll get out of here at midnight.
Yeah, right.
Sure, Fred, you run a
See,
good meeting.
No, I didn't open this meeting.
Oh, it's all his fault.
Slick
Blame it on
caused a
Greg.
problem here. Okay, I took a cut at the Finance Committee schedule. I sent it out.
Oh, yeah,
If
yeah.
anybody wants a copy, here it is. And Betsy wins the prize for finding
I'll take an extra two.
my,
I go to, well, I try to put in my calendar and it says Monday and it's a Wednesday
fine,
date. It's like,
absolutely.
no, it does not compute, you know? See another one?
and this,
How old is
basically.
this stuff?
Yeah, huh?
Oh, you like that, huh?
Digital, woo-hoo.
Yeah, that's,
Digital.
yeah, you like that. Had a
Fred
friend,
never throws anything away.
Have a digital wardrobe in the closet.
there you go, yeah. No, my wife found the
Is that
box.
date on this 1986 or something?
I found a
Probably.
floppy disk the other day that had digital on it.
Yeah.
Oh, anyway,
So-
moving right along.
This basically dovetails with Bonnie's budget calendar.
Yep.
And, excuse me, there may be meetings added if issues come up. And I plugged in the September 13th, just as a sort of a kickoff meeting going into the budget cycle. And normally Bonnie comes in and she brings in the budget letter and whatnot, and we just sort of talk about it. And oftentimes she has reserve fund transfers and whatnot after the summer. So it's basically a housekeeping meeting, and then after that, we sort of get into the budget cycle. So if you can just sort of plan on those. Traditionally, we've had Tuesday nights. We can change it, but it seems to work for a lot of people, so hopefully we can work around it.
Yeah, I mean, you know my schedule. I travel a lot during the week.
Yeah.
I've been able to make most of the meetings because I have enough advance notice. I can.
Right.
I have the
Sort of
flexibility.
It's like,
jig right away.
I'm flying
Most of the
tomorrow
time.
morning, 7 AM. Just-
Okay, well, okay, so we have plenty of time. So, okay, that's the meeting schedule as it's set right now. So the next meeting would be September 13th, and I'll put out an agenda and whatnot prior to that. The Fincom, again, for Gary's edification, what we do basically is break up the departments and assign different Fincom members to preview the department budgets before they come to the budget review session, which has now been pushed out to January. Mainly because we've got the big special town meeting and the national elections and whatnot that kind of mess people up in November. And then December is a horrible month to try and get everybody together. So we pushed it out to January. And that just gives Bonnie and Steve a little more slack to get things together before we review them. And last year, we sort of had a hiatus in January and February waiting for the school committee to sort of finalize their act and whatnot. So I think pushing that, really the meat of our schedule out into January, I don't think is going to be a big problem. But we will do a preliminary capital and budget plan in the end of November and December with Bonnie. because she'll have a lot of her department budgets in, and she has a lot of her estimates done. So she sort of gives us a pulse as to what's going on late in November and mid-December if necessary. We may do the December meeting or not, to seeing how things are going. Okay. So, have any of you thought of departments that you particularly want or don't want? Or, I know last year, Alan, you had,
I had all the finance departments.
right, finance, assessors, tax collector,
I'd like to do
treasurer.
that again.
You're okay with that?
Sure.
Okay. Let's see. Greg and
We split up.
you guys had highway, light and water, cemetery, historical commission, and library.
What did Paul Glavy have?
Paul and Tom had schools and fire department.
I would like to volunteer for school.
Schools.
Yeah,
So if you and Tom do schools and fire,
yeah, that's,
because we've got the paramedic proposal,
yeah.
which I think probably you and Tom could work with them on in the schools.
You
And
have connections with the schools too, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm willing to, the first, I like the ones that are jumping on with somebody else for the first time around.
We would
just-
definitely do that.
Yeah, so.
Well,
Yeah,
maybe
no,
we put those two
maybe-
together, eh?
Yeah, maybe
put those two together and have pull
Fire.
Tom.
put Tom with Steve maybe.
Steve
on the other
and
ones,
the
we'll swap
other.
them around, if he
Okay.
doesn't mind.
Fire in the school.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so we've got Greg and Gary.
You might want to just look too, I don't know which one I had last time, but it was pretty light. I was thinking the fire department, school, those are two big ones, only two, so maybe it's still the right way to do it. But,
Yeah, let's see here, I'm sorry.
remember,
Well, I had
Planning
police,
department.
rec, COA, town clerk, and vets. I think that's
That's fine.
okay. Yeah, let's see, what did you
here,
have?
the planning board and
Yeah, you had
zoning, I
conservation
thought.
zone, yeah,
Yeah,
this
this
must
one
be
here.
Betsy.
Yeah, and, yeah, because Lauren's, I think I got cut off at the top, because it's planning board up here. So,
Oh, yeah.
but it's, again, it's pretty light. I mean, that's fine if you want to keep it that way.
What do you want to?
I mean, you could put- you could-
Step, yeah, what would you like? Steve, are you okay with what you had before? I mean,
What do we have, 5 last
you
time?
you had highway, light and water,
Yeah,
cemetery, historical, and library.
yeah.
I mean, you're basically in bed with the library anyway. Right?
Wow. How's that going?
Thanks, Dave.
Stephen, thank you.
See you,
Good night,
Steve.
Steve.
Night, Steve.
Nice job filling in.
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
It doesn't matter. I mean, I'll do
I mean,
whatever you
do
want
you-
me to do, it doesn't matter.
I mean,
It's just- I'm
you know, probably the school in of itself is,
It, done right, it could be a
Done right,
full-time
it
broad,
could
so if
be
you
a
want to put
full-time.
fire department on mine.
but we could
since
drop
Those other
fire,
ones are really like
just do-
nothing. They're
just
just,
do the school.
they have a person and a
That's fine.
half of a secretary, and there's really not a lot of budget discussion to have. with
Okay,
some of the
so
departments I have.
Steve, you and Tom would do highway, and that's likely to be a little bit, because they'll be hiring
engineer.
an engineer or
Yeah.
head guy, right?
Yeah.
It seemed like that was
There's-
probably the biggest of the
And,
bunch.
Light-
and depending what happens with the fields too, there could be some stuff going on there too, depending how things play out.
It could be,
Wishful thinking.
yeah.
Yeah, okay, so it's highway, light and water, cemetery, historical, and the library.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
you're okay with that?
Yep.
With you and Tom?
Actually.
I think historical last year asked for $500.
Yeah, that's a long conversation.
But it was an interesting
It is, oh, it is,
conversation.
it's great. It's fascinating, actually. I think the cemetery, talking to him, what goes on over there too, and he loves that place so much, you know?
He does,
Okay,
It's
and
great.
one thing we said about schools that we didn't do last year was include Neshoba Tech. And that would be contacting Charlie Ellis.
I know Charlie pretty
Yeah,
well.
and what we would be looking for is his best guess on the chargeback to the town. And it depends on the number of kids that we have going there. And for some reason, trying to get that information through the schools is difficult. But Charlie ought to be able to get that back for us.
Should have a good
So that I think would be helpful for Bonnie if we could get that number.
So Fred,
Okay.
what's the time frame for these interviews?
Normally, I said, it just sort of
December.
start in, the budget cycle for the departments will start in October. So and the budgets are due in like November 18th to Bonnie.
Yeah, okay.
So October through November, I think, is a reasonable timeframe. Now, the schools will probably want to push out further, but as much as you can get, as early as you can get, will be helpful to
Yeah,
Bonnie.
we'll work on those guys, see if we can just get a better report going on.
Right,
Okay.
all right. So I think that'll be, okay, so I'll put that together with, let's see, Greg and Gary together with schools. Fire comes to you.
Sure,
Betsy,
why
you
not?
okay?
Because the other ones do not take that much.
So you've got
Yeah.
these plus fire, you're okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, that's right, I'm sorry, you had building.
Yeah, yeah,
plans.
right,
Okay.
exactly.
You're okay with that?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. And Alan, you're okay with
Yep, got it.
these? Okay, I'll keep the police, the rec, COA, town clerk, and veterans. Okay, I think that covers everybody. I'll put the list out to everybody, and, so you'll see it. And we'll work towards this calendar with dealing with the different departments, if that works with you.
Yeah, I got a note in here, we'll just probably try to arrange a meeting sometime in early October.
And
Conversations going.
what they tend to do is have like 7:30 to 8:30 in the morning meetings. So I don't know whether that's good or bad for you guys, but the meetings that they invite us to is they tend to have it at early morning meetings. But,
The other thing,
dealing with Mike, I should be able to do some work something, yeah. I'm sorry.
talking about assignments, we have representatives from the Finance Committee on to other committees like PCP.
That's right, CPA.
That
Yep.
was Glady last year, wasn't it?
No, I was CPA.
Oh, you were, okay.
I was, yeah.
You gonna hold on to that?
I'll open it to discussion. If anybody particularly wants to do CPA, I'm open to it. If not, I don't mind doing it again. It's,
If you want to do it, I don't have an issue with that.
okay, so,
But are you also gonna have policies and procedures going? Because you're gonna get yourself pretty busy here if you wanna keep doing all that other stuff too.
well, CPA isn't,
It's not
Isn't all that-
onerous, okay.
Are there any other committees we typically,
I
We should.
usually represent the board on the Personnel Committee. I've been doing that for 910,000 years.
It's not sure
But the
your age,
Personnel,
so careful.
the Personnel Committee meets usually at 8:30 in the morning, once a month. Sometimes twice
You go to
a
every,
month.
do you go to every meeting?
Yeah,
Every meeting?
yeah, in fact, I'm the chairman.
Well, that's a good
That just
reason.
happened to work out that way.
Okay.
But,
You involved or committed, huh? Chicken or the egg?
Such a well-known committee, I didn't know that.
yeah. But I will be perfectly glad to turn that over to someone else at some point, if they're interested in it. It's
any interest this year? or do
I
you-
try to steer clear of morning meeting, like committing myself every month to a morning meeting. That's during work hours.
You don't have anything
You're
to
the
do.
chair, you wanna stay there now.
no, I don't. I didn't want to be the chair.
Where's Tom? I can volunteer.
Oh, that's right.
Want probably
right.
wasn't the right
Tom, what do you
word.
think?
Tom,
But
right.
you probably committed.
what do they do?
Okay, so
Okay.
if everybody's okay, well,
Sal.
anybody interested or continue with Alan on Personnel Board?
I think you're gonna have breakfast with them once a month.
Okay,
Well, anyway, Gary, if you're interested at some point,
I'd like this to come in and, sit in
Yeah,
when I can, so
I'll-
if you could send me the schedule.
next
like-
meeting, I'll give you a yell.
It sounds like you're getting
Yeah.
ready to want to hand
Because
it
I
out.
know you've got a personnel background, and
Yeah.
and I don't know what your
that's
work
great.
schedule is like, but 8:30 is usually really good, it's good for all
Yeah.
our members, so.
Yeah, on weeks when I tell her, hopefully, something would line up. So,
All right, I'll invite you, just
Do it,
come by
yeah.
and take a listen.
great.
And if we need to do anything, it seriously, and if you're interested,
Yeah.
if we need to formalize something to
We can do that
assign,
at later.
assign them to it, then that's
great.
fine. But go in and kick the tires and see what you think.
Yeah, let me just see, in the schedule, we'll see what,
That's good.
Okay,
Cool,
good.
very good.
All righty. Member updates, just go around the table. And the only reason this is on, Gary, is if you happen to be talking to somebody from one of the departments and there's something you want to bring back to the committee, please do that.
okay.
And, I guess the only department that I guess that you'd be affiliated with would be the school committee, but, the school department. But and again, around town, you see somebody, you hear somebody, there's something rumbling, just
Okay.
bring it up.
Yeah.
So,
From the personnel side, this next year, we're going to be going out for a consultant to come in and do a reclass again, compensation, and because union contracts are going to be coming up again the year after. So that's something that we're going to be doing. And you can look forward to an increase in salaries, obviously, because that's what happens every time we go out for a recon. So that's one of the big things we're going to be doing over the next year on the personnel board.
and where is that being funded from? Is that,
We'll come in asking for funds to do that.
okay,
It'll be in the next budget.
okay.
I actually have something, this is more of a Board of Selectmen type update, but, here we hear all the requests all the time to buy land, we want to keep the rural nature of the town and so on. I'd like to put a plug out that we are very fortunate in Littleton to have several working farms. The farm stands, however, have really been hit between Market Basket and Whole Foods and other things. Their business is down, and the best way we can support our rural nature and keeping the open space and so on is to support these farms. So I really encourage people to go to these farm stands and buy their product and get real whole foods and real fresh foods there and do a lot of good all the way around.
Tis the season.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, and a lot of beautiful things out there now, for sure.
Corn's
Gary's
fantastic.
corn is excellent.
No, it's great, yeah.
We go
I
up and
think-
get two, I get 3 years at a time.
Yeah.
Well, it's all I'm putting.
We're closer to the farm stands than we are to Market Basket.
Okay.
I've got another one.
Gary?
Thank you for the welcome. I'm looking
No,
forward to
welcome
it.
aboard, and I apologize for being late.
I'm fine.
See? Okay.
I'd just like to extend condolences to Keith.
Keith, yeah.
And his family.
Yeah, Keith's mother passed away yesterday.
Oh, I didn't hear about that.
She's apparently, I think, being waked Thursday evening in Danvers and funeral on Friday. So I just
I didn't know.
pass any condolences along to Keith, and
Thank you for mentioning
feel
that.
free to do that, yeah. And let's see, I had a copy and I don't, just an FYI, the Board of Selectmen are going through they have a public hearing on the 22nd on their goals and objectives. I forwarded that out to everybody. If there's anything of particular interest, I thought it was interesting that the 9th of 10 or 10th of 11 goals was a long-term financial plan, which I think is a wonderful thing for them to be thinking about. And I think the debt service discussion that we had, I think plays right into that. So I think that's a good thing for us to at least pay attention to going forward. And I guess that's it for me. And the last thing I had before asking for motion to adjourn is approval of the minutes for July 12th. I get back to Maryland, I thought they were okay as far as I was concerned. I don't know if anybody has had any issues or concerns with them. I'll look for a motion to
I'll
approve them.
make a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion to approve and a second for the meeting minutes for July 12, 2016. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Yeah, one
Okay, and just mark Gary as an abstention because he wasn't here. He can't. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4. 5, 0, 4, with one exception. Okay, I'll look for the most anticipated
So
motion of
moved.
the evening. Do I have a second? A motion and second to adjourn? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Dave?
Okay, flip the switch.
Good stuff.